let's talk about a huge victory in Massachusetts, where Ayanna Pressley beat Michael Capuano, a 10-term incumbent on the Democratic side. She will be the first person of color to ever represent the state of Massachusetts in Congress. With her victory, bottom line, y'all, she guaranteed to win in November. The number of members of the Congressional Black Caucus who are African-American will exceed 50. Already, the CBC is the largest caucus on the Democratic side. And so Pressley, she wins. And so we can't wait to have her right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. And here's the huge thing. I'm going to talk about this with our panel in just 1 second. By her winning, another progressive goes down. And this is why it's important, folks, that you're not scared to run against people who are longtime incumbents. And so, last night, so I'm on Twitter and I'm following this whole deal, and someone on her campaign posted this video, and this is when Pressley found out that she had won.
Tracy? Oh
my God!
Yeah, somebody is.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
And again, a huge victory for Ayanna Pressley. All right, folks, let's break this thing down with our panel. Joining me right now, of course, we have Scott Bolden. Always have the little Kappas in the house. Scott Bolden,
thank you for having me back,
of the D.C. Democratic Party. Glad to have him on the show. We also have Avis Jones DeWeaver. Avis, of course, she, of course, How Black Women Lead, and she's of course, a life coach for people who really need it. She should really take on Scott. Of course, we have Eugene Craig with the Eugene Craig organization as well. So I want to talk about the Pressley win. That's a huge victory because, again, we saw this with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And then we saw the other races as well, where folks said, look, enough with this crap that somehow incumbents, you can't challenge them. They ran against them, and what's interesting about Pressley, the Congressional Black Caucus PAC
didn't endorse her.
Supported Capuano over the black woman. Congressman John Lewis came into town, held a rally for Capuano, and the sister is running, and now they got some explaining to do because she wins. They back the establishment loses.
Yeah, I mean, this is reminiscent of 2010. Before we went off air news, when I saw all the time that the progressive movement's going through right now, what we went through with the Tea Party, where it's not necessarily popping off the other side, but you're popping off weaker candidates or more establishment candidates within your own party and taking the party more left, more right.
Yeah, I think that the progressives have been winning, but it's been every race is different. We saw what happened in Maryland. We saw what happened in New York. Last night was a little different because Bernie Sanders got behind some of these progressive candidates and they won on the ground and with money. Now, in Massachusetts, she was a complete underdog, as you just described, and she won because she had a grassroots campaign, and this was a majority African-American Hispanic district that time had come, that her time had come, and we could not wait on Trump. It was a grassroots campaign that made the difference. I don't think Bernie Sanders supported her either.
Well, but that's the point I want to make here, because people talk about, in terms just like Bernie Sanders, his role in Florida. The reality is you can have Bernie Sanders support you all you want to, but if you don't go precinct to precinct, if you're not going door to door, registering people and getting the turnout, you don't win, Avis. And that's what we're seeing. And so, and what this is reminding me of, again, this is called old school politics.
Absolutely. In fact, I think people
it's not about the airwaves.
Absolutely.
It's the ground.
And I also believe people are overinflating the importance of Bernie Sanders. I mean, people did not, we didn't have the result that we've had in Florida because of Bernie Sanders. We had that result because we had a good candidate who was out there doing what needed to be done to get those votes and to earn those votes. And in terms of what's happened with Ayanna Pressley, what we're seeing now, honestly, is a rise in black women candidates across the country. We have a record number of black women running across the country. Many of them are looking really, really, very, very fortunate in terms of their potential in November. And so she is just one of a wave of new black women candidates that we will see coming to Washington and all across this country representing their constituents.
But it certainly doesn't help, though. It doesn't hurt to have Bernie Sanders' list, Bernie Sanders' fundraising campaign. If you look at the race in Maryland, for example, Ben Jealous, a great Kappa man, if I may say.
He's not going to win, though.
The thing is this, you got to get credit where credit's due. It's not Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders helped him lift his name, his voting list, as well as his fundraising mechanism.
But here's the piece, though. But here's what we're seeing.
Whether he wins or not.
But hold on. Here's what we're seeing. You're seeing groups like Collective PAC. Yeah. You're seeing Adrian Shropshire. You're seeing Latasha Brown. You're seeing DeWanna Watson. You're seeing these groups of African Americans who are early on, at the outset, endorsing candidates, putting their money behind them as well, raising the money, giving them the level of attention that they need to jumpstart their campaign. Absolutely. And first of all, every little bit helps in a campaign, no matter who's supporting you. But what we're seeing is, on the ground, old school politics making, really determining how folks are able to put themselves in a position to win.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Collective PAC is playing an amazing role right now on the Democratic side. You know, they put $2 million, behind Gillum. They were behind Pressley and a lot of other candidates. You know, I equate Collective PAC to the role that Freedom Works played in the Tea Party in 2010, 2012. I mean, it's that early money and that early support, and that gives a candidate credibility and build out that infrastructure.
But,
and it's also, exactly. And it's also
do it very stealthy, by the way.
Absolutely, very, very expertly. And they're providing cabinet training. It's just a very comprehensive level of support. But in addition to that, it's also a message that I believe these candidates are sending the broader Democratic Party to not be scared. Don't be scared. Go out there and say what needs to be said at a time like this. This is the last moment in which we need to have a Democratic Party that is weak, that is not willing to stand up and fight. And those candidates that are winning are the ones that are saying, I'm here to fight against this unprecedented challenge that we are facing.
But they're not all progressives that are winning. You have mainstream candidates that are winning. The Democratic Party stop. Stop what?
The progressive candidates are mainstream. Now, I think what you say, no, they are mainstream. No, follow me.
They just started winning.
Follow me here. First of all, progressives have won for years. Okay, so when I say by trying to say that they're not mainstream, they are mainstream. The difference is a Connor Lamb is a different type of district than an Ocasio-Cortez district.
Exactly.
Which is different. So it's all mainstream.
But it's not mainstream.
It is mainstream.
Wanting to have...
Is Maxine Waters mainstream?
You don't have to yell at me if you disagree.
Well, Scott, is Maxine Waters mainstream?
Maxine Waters mainstream because she's been there for 30 years.
No, because what Maxine Waters has been running on, her district is a progressive district. But she's mainstream.
Universal health care, wanting colleges to be free for individuals. Those are not mainstream, moderate Democrat principles.
If you see the polling numbers, it shows it's mainstream.
But I'm talking about candidates and elected officials have not embraced that until recently.
No.
And when
Here's
the progressives tried to run the DNC several times in the last 2 or 3 years, they lost.
First of all, they lost.
And so,
first of all, they lost because of the massive amount of corporate dollars that were driving the party.
And there was nothing illegal about that.
No, I didn't say there was anything illegal about it.
Now they've learned to win in some spots, and that's great.
No, not learn to win in some spots.
The Democratic Party is still at war.
Scott, they got tired of losing.
The progressives have got to show that they can win nationwide.
Here's my point.
They can win in some states.
Here's my point.
God bless them.
The reason I'm going to push it back on the mainstream piece is because if we allow that becomes the narrative, that somehow if you're progressive, you're not mainstream. Yes, you are.
But
because here's the piece.
I can make actually, I'm going to give Scott a tag team here.
Because the Tea Party folks,
Ben Jealous,
it's amazing how the Tea Party folks were not mainstream.
Hold on here. I'll say this.
Right.
Scott actually does have a point. In Maryland, Ben Jealous is probably a progressive. Maryland has a 2-to-1 voter registration, Democrats or Republican. Governor Hogan is kicking Jealous's butt right now. Every ounce of polling, he's up almost 20 points. I mean, I think there's an argument to be made about progressivism and mainstream.
No, that's not what it is. That's not what it is. Hold on, one second. Let me break it down. This is what it is. Larry Hogan is a
great governor.
Larry Hogan is a Republican, but Larry Hogan is governing as a moderate Republican. Let me hold up 2 Republicans in blue states. Larry Hogan in Maryland, Bruce Rauner in Illinois. 2 blue states, flat out, Democrats, 2-1 control.
They have no choice.
No,
They have no choice
not
but to
true.
govern like that.
Not true.
You want them to embrace Trump?
Scott, let me break it down for you. Let me teach you something. Larry Hogan governs in a moderate way.
He is back.
He signs legislation that Democrats also approve of. Bruce Rauner in a blue state fights Mike Madigan, fights Democrats, fights them, didn't sign a budget for almost 4 years, has destroyed it fiscally. Guess what? He's about to lose to a Democrat. The reason Hogan is up because even some Democrats said he supported this. You know what? It ain't bad. So Jealous has a much larger hill to climb than Pritzker does because the type of person is run. My point is, I don't want us to use mainstream media's language by somehow saying that you progressive, you not mainstream, because it sounds like you out of the mainstream when in fact you actually are there. But speaking of out of the mainstream,
There are not that many progressives.
I got you. Speaking of, first of all, there are lots of
There's the
progressive.
problem.
They just don't want to call themselves that.